Hey, welcome to In the Chute. That's Calen. I am Brandon. I answer questions, maybe. We'll see what we got. What do you got, Calen?
Today is going to be continuing the questions of cold weather. And we've talked about blankets before for horses. Cows, we can't really do much about. They just kind of have to find the low ground and maybe get out of some wind, and that helps the best. Sometimes we'll feed them a little bit of extra hay for feed, but also they can bed down in it a little bit and then they'll eat it eventually. The other thing, though, is horses. Sometimes we still have to use horses in the wintertime when it's cold, whether we're moving animals or there's been sometimes too where it may not be extremely cold. It'll be 30s, 40s, maybe even 20s, but it's doable for being able to work and train the horses because we do train all year round if possible. And so typically when you're riding a horse, that will often involve bitting said horse. So when you take the bit, the steel bit, the metal bit that's about to go in this horse's mouth, how do you prep that and how do you take care of the horse so that they're not absolutely miserable throughout the ride and then afterwards as well? Because sometimes you're working a horse and they're working hard, and just like us, we sweat.
Yeah,
How do you make sure that they don't go hypothermic from the sweat and everything like that?
that's a good question. I mean, as long as they're covered and you're working and the saddle stays on them, it's not that big of a deal. If you're working that hard where you're sweating that cold, you're working pretty hard. And we normally don't do that, but they still will sweat while you're riding. So you let them not cool down, but you let them warm back up. Essentially, kind of let them dry off a little bit. Um, keep them, if you can keep them in the barn a little bit, uh, wipe them down, put fresh towel on them, blanket on them, rub them down a little bit. We really haven't had to do that much. I mean, we normally are not riding them that hard, and so it's not an issue. But those are some of the things, some of the extreme measures that you may have to take, which it doesn't seem extreme to maybe some people who work their horses and wash them down. Well, you don't do that here, in the wintertime.
If we had the facilities, like maybe in Kentucky where you had stables and stuff like that, that'd
Yeah,
be different. But
but
we
you're
don't
not
have.
getting the extreme cold weather that we get here
Right.
and the wind. So, but you let them dry off, and then you can turn them out. But the bitting issue is usually beforehand, before you start. And there's times that you'll look in the house, and I've got a couple of headstalls hanging on doorknobs so that metal bit is 65, 70 degrees in the house, and I've got everybody or those that I'm going to use saddled, waiting, and then I'll come in the house, grab the headstall with a bit on it, and just keep it in my hands, keep it warm, and then be able to slip that in their mouth, and that's a whole lot more palatable than taking a bit that potentially you could pull it off the wall in the barn that's not heated and throw that in a horse's mouth. They open their mouth and it sticks to their tongue. I mean,
Mm.
like Christmas Vacation or was it
Christmas
Christmas
story.
Story? There you go.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that can happen. So no animal wants to do that, human or nor beast. So, trying to think ahead like that, at least put it in the shop portion of our barn where, I usually try to keep that at 45, 50 degrees, but even that is cool. And if I've got that kind of temperature in a fall or a spring, ambient temperature, then I'll still warm that bit up. I'll hold it in my hands. I'll just kind of grip it while I'm doing stuff and pack that thing around for 5 minutes to grab some extra heat, so it's at least halfway warm when I go to stick it in their mouth. I like using a hackamore. I really like using a hackamore just for that purpose in the wintertime. You've got nothing in that horse's mouth, and they can get a good drink year round with that. And I don't want them eating when I'm riding, but so that's not really the issue. But not having a metal piece of appliance in their mouth when it's cold is really a nice thing for that horse to have. So it's all in the training what you want to put on them, and try to make it comfortable for them.
Is there anything else that you would do on the opposite end? So when it's hot out, maybe cool off the bit or anything, or make it more comfortable for them?
Yeah,
Because
just
I mean, steel, it's very malleable with the well, not necessarily malleable, but conductible with the heat or the
yeah.
lack thereof.
Well, you just don't keep it in the sun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shaded in the barn, hanging on the tack room wall. And at the most, let's say if it's 100 degrees out, well, that's a horse's body temperature right at 102. So that's not much of a change. But just don't put that in the sun where that thing is hot where you can't hang on to it. Yeah, you'll burn your own hands. So just use some common sense like that. Also using light pads, something that'll wick away sweat in the summertime, the extreme heat. Same kind of deal. You're just protecting that horse's body and their back.
And then, is there anything that you won't do with a horse or have them do for you when it's extreme cold weathers and you need to use the horse?
Well, I mean, I usually don't lope a lot unless you have to. Slick ground. If you got some snow covered ground, you may have holes in the ground that you don't necessarily see. We do have prairie dogs, we have badgers, we got gophers, and that ground can get some snow on it and blow over the top of these holes where these animals are in at least a semi hibernation state. So they're not coming up, and especially when it's cold, they're not going to come up. And you can pretty easily dump some feet in a hole, break a leg, tip over, have them fall on you. Anything can happen like that. So as far as the footing, I really try to just kind of avoid some slick areas. I don't like shoeing a horse for a minimum use of those shoes. So just kind of use some common sense and work around it. But if you have to sharp shoe a horse because there's a lot of ice on an extended winter, you just do it. We haven't had to do that for a long, long time. I've got some shoes where we can put some little grippy metal on there, and haven't had to do that in a long time as well. So it's kind of nice to have the opportunity, have the ability, and then just decide whether the opportunity is long enough to warrant it or not. And most of the time, we're able to get away with not having to.
Do you use spurs in the wintertime?
I usually don't, because a lot of times I'll have a pair of boots on that I'm just barely able to get into my Visalia style stirrups, and got some overshoes on, at least usually a boot with an overshoe on it, not even really a winter boot, but just to keep my foot dry. And you can't get a set of spurs on and you can't hold it on. So it's really irrelevant. And, we don't use our spurs to make a horse go necessarily. It's about, making their body contain their frame and gather themselves up. A whole different conversation at another time for why we do that.
And that's what we do with the ponies in the cold weather and how to take care of them.
What about the horse cows though?
Well, we don't need to worry about that because we just talked about bits and stuff.
Yeah, but cows we don't blanket.
Yeah, well,
when you look at a cow with a bunch of snow on them, don't feel sorry for them. They're warmer than if they don't have
they're
it.
insulated.
Yeah, exactly. That snow holds some heat.
But
just as a sidebar.
yeah, but that's cold weather and the equine partners.